The great crystal dome of Nexus Prime sparkled with light from 1,000 different stars. Inside the massive station that floated in neutral space, representatives from across the galaxy had gathered for another routine council meeting. Most expected to discuss trade routes and mining rights. None expected to hear a warning that would change everything. Ambassador Kale stepped forward from the Valian delegation. His tall, thin body shimmered like water in moonlight, and his large eyes held worry that made other species uncomfortable. The Vailians were older than most civilizations in the galaxy, and they rarely spoke unless something was very wrong. "Fellow delegates," Kale began, his voice carrying clearly through translation devices worn by every species present. "I bring urgent news about the humans." A ripple of laughter spread through the assembly. Humans were barely worth mentioning in galactic politics. They had only just figured out how to travel between stars, and they spent most of their time fighting each other over small pieces of rock and metal. General Vex of the Crex hegemony clicked his mandibles in amusement. His species looked like giant insects covered in black armor, and they had conquered more worlds than any other empire in known space. The soft pink creatures from that little blue world? What could they possibly do to concern us? Kale's form flickered with deeper worry patterns. That is exactly the problem. You see them as weak because they fight among themselves. You think this makes them easy to defeat. You are wrong. Representative Oryx spoke next. The Trade Federation delegate was more machine than organic now, with glowing red sensors for eyes and a voice that sounded like grinding metal. They cannot even agree on how to govern their single planet. Their largest nations point weapons at each other instead of exploring space together. How could such a divided species threaten anyone? Because you do not understand what humans become when they stop fighting each other, Kale replied, his voice growing more urgent. My people have studied them for 300 years. We have watched their history, analyzed their behavior patterns, documented their responses to external threats. He activated a holographic display that showed Earth rotating slowly in the center of the council chamber. Images flashed around it. Wars, disasters, invasions that had shaped human development over thousands of years. Look at their history, Kale continued. When the northern ice sheets advanced and threatened to kill them all, they learned to work together and survived. When plagues wiped out half their population, they shared knowledge and rebuilt stronger. When their world wars nearly destroyed them, they created global institutions to prevent it from happening again. Senator Ural of the Peaceful Consortium fluttered her wing membranes dismissively. Her people had achieved harmony centuries ago and looked down on species that still fought wars. Primitive responses to primitive problems. Surely an advanced civilization would have evolved beyond such crude survival instincts. That is where you are wrong, Kale said firmly. Humans never evolved beyond those instincts. They refined them. They turned survival into an art form. When humans face a threat that could destroy them all, something changes in their brains. Their petty conflicts disappear. Their separate nations become one people. Their individual desires merge into a single purpose. General Vex's armored head tilted skeptically. Even if this is true, what difference does it make? Unity without strength is worthless. They have primitive weapons and barely a dozen warships. My fleets could sweep through their system in a matter of hours. Kale's entire body pulsed with alarm colors that made several delegates step back. You still do not understand. When humans unite, they do not just combine their existing strength. They become something new, something that builds strength faster than should be possible. He changed the holographic display to show human industrial capacity during their greatest wars. Factories that had made automobiles switch into tanks overnight. Civilian populations working around the clock to build weapons. Scientists developing new technologies in months instead of years. They call it total war, Kale explained. Every human becomes a soldier. Every factory becomes a weapons plant. Every scientist works on defeating the enemy. They do not fight to win territory or resources. They fight to make sure the threat can never hurt them again. The council chamber grew quieter as some delegates began to understand the implications. Representative Oryx processed the data through his mechanical brain. You are suggesting that attacking humans would make them stronger, not weaker. I am suggesting that attacking humans would create something the galaxy has never seen before, Kale replied. A species that treats war not as politics, but as survival. A people who will sacrifice everything to ensure their children have a future. General Vex scoffed. Fear-mongering. No species fights to total destruction. Everyone negotiates when the cost becomes too high. Kale looked directly at the Krex general, his large eyes reflecting sadness. Humans do not negotiate when they believe their survival is at stake. They fight until either they are all dead or their enemy no longer has the power to threaten them. There is no middle ground. The vote came quickly. Most delegates saw the warning as Vialian paranoia. A few neutral species abstained, but the majority dismissed Kale's concerns. The decision was recorded in the Galactic archives and promptly forgotten as the council session ended and delegates returned to their ships. Kale remained in the chamber staring at the holographic image of Earth. He whispered a prayer in the ancient Vialian language, hoping he was wrong about what would happen next. 6 months later, General Vex launched his invasion fleet toward human space, confident that the primitive species would surrender after show of force. The warning had come too late. Captain Day 1 Kim was drinking his morning coffee when the alarm started screaming. He had been flying cargo ships between Earth and the outer colonies for 12 years, and nothing ever happened on these routine supply runs. Today was supposed to be different only because he was carrying medical supplies to New Geneva instead of his usual mining equipment. Captain, you need to see this, called Ensign Eugene Lee from the sensor station. The young man's voice cracked with fear. Day 1 set down his coffee and walked to the bridge of the small cargo vessel Soul's Pride. On the main screen, massive shapes were appearing out of nowhere. Ships longer than city blocks, black as space itself, with red markings that looked like blood against their dark hulls. How many? The one asked, though he could already count at least 20 of the alien vessels. 57 confirmed, sir. More still appearing. Hajine's hands shook as he worked the controls. Captain, they're bigger than anything in our databases. These aren't exploration ships. Before Day 1 could respond, every screen on the bridge lit up with an incoming transmission. The face that appeared was Nightmare Fuel, insect-like features covered in black armor, with mandibles that clicked when it spoke. Attention, primitive humans, the creature said, its voice translated into harsh, mechanical words. I am General Vorthak of the Krex Hegemony. Your expansion into space ends today. Return to your birth world immediately and submit to Krex authority, or we will demonstrate why resistance is futile. Day 1 felt his stomach drop. He had heard rumors about the Krex from other spacers, stories of entire civilizations that had simply vanished after refusing their demands. But humans had never made contact with them before. This is Captain Day 1 Kim of the United Earthship Soul's Pride, he replied, trying to keep his voice steady. We're a civilian cargo vessel carrying medical supplies. We're not military. General Vorthak's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. Your military status is irrelevant. You will observe the consequences of defying the Krex hegemony. The transmission ended. On the sensor display, Day 1 watched as the alien fleet moved toward New Geneva Colony. The agricultural station hung in space like a small jewel, completely defenseless. Hajine, get me an emergency channel to Earth Command. Day 1 ordered. All frequencies, maximum broadcast power. Sir, should we try to warn the colony? They already know. But everyone else needs to see what happens next. The orbital bombardment began 12 minutes later. Day 1 had fought in Earth's corporate wars, had seen ships destroyed in battle, but this was different. The Krex weapons didn't just destroy the colony's defenses. They systematically eliminated every structure, every ship, every sign that humans had ever lived there. New Geneva had been home to 2.3 million people. Farmers, scientists, teachers, children. In 18 minutes, they were all gone. The Soul's Pride recorded everything. Hajine sent the footage on every frequency humans used, military channels, civilian networks, corporate communications, even the emergency broadcast that reached the most remote mining stations. On Earth, President Minho Jiang was in a security meeting when his aide rushed in with a tablet showing the live feed. The president watched in silence as a colony where his own sister had lived disappeared in bright flashes of alien fire. On Mars, Chief Administrator Janae Park stopped her morning briefing when every screen in the room switched to the emergency broadcast. She had helped design New Geneva's agricultural systems. Now she watched them burn. In the asteroid belt, mining boss Sung-Min Kong received the transmission just as he was preparing to fire the first shots in a corporate war against his biggest rival. Instead, he opened a direct channel to his enemy. "Did you see it?" he asked. "I saw it," came the reply. "The war's off. We have bigger problems now." Within 3 hours, something unprecedented began happening across human space. President Minho Jiang placed direct calls to every major human leader, not through diplomatic channels or formal negotiations, but person to person, human to human. They killed civilians first, he told each leader. They targeted noncombatants as a show of force. That's not war, that's extermination. Chief Administrator Janae Park called an emergency session of the Mars Colonial Council, motioned to suspend all current disputes and recognize their authority for military coordination, she announced. The vote was unanimous. Corporate executives who had been fighting over mining rights suddenly found themselves in the same room, planning how to convert their industrial facilities to military production. The Belt Mining Consortium offered their entire fleet to Earth Command. The Europa communes, who had declared independence from Earth just 2 years before, formally requested to rejoin the United Earth government. By the end of the day, something that had never existed in human history came into being. The Terran War Council. Every human faction, every government, every corporation agreed to place their resources under unified command. General Vorthak, monitoring human communications from his flagship, was puzzled by the response. His intelligence had indicated that humans were divided, constantly fighting among themselves. He had expected surrender within days, certainly after they saw what happened to those who resisted. Instead, he was seeing something his species had never encountered before. The humans weren't fragmenting under pressure. They were coming together. "Admiral," his intelligence officer reported, "human industrial output has increased by 400% in the last 6 hours. Every civilian facility is retooling for military production." Vorthak clicked his mandibles in annoyance. Irrelevant. Primitive weapons cannot threaten Krek's forces. But deep in his armored chest, something that might have been worried began to grow. In 3 centuries of conquest, no species had ever responded to Krek's intimidation by becoming more unified. The humans were doing something wrong, something dangerous, something unprecedented. Admiral So-Young Choi stood in the newly built command center on Luna Base, staring at screens that would have been impossible just 6 months ago. The room buzzed with activity as officers from every human faction worked side by side, former enemies now united under black and silver banner of the Terran War Council. "Fleet status report," she called out to her staff. Commander Hyun-Woo Nam, who used to fight against Earth forces during the Belt Wars, now served as her chief of operations. "Admiral, we have complete integration. Every human ship in space is now responding to unified command. Corporate security fleets, government navies, even the rebel ships from Titan, they're all ours." So-Young nodded. The transformation had been remarkable to watch. Ships that had been shooting at each other just months ago now flew in perfect formation. Crews that had been trained to hate each other now shared bunks and battle plans. "What about production numbers?" "Beyond all projections, ma'am." Commander Nam pulled up industrial reports on the main screen. Director Sung-Min Kang's factories have completely retooled. Assembly lines that made personal computers are now producing targeting systems. Shipyards that built pleasure craft are launching destroyers. The changes weren't limited to military production. On Earth, every major corporation had volunteered their resources. Mining companies provided raw materials at cost. Tech companies shared their most advanced research freely. Even entertainment companies had converted their studios into propaganda centers, creating recruitment videos that played across human space. Lieutenant Un Ji-young approached with the latest intelligence reports. "Admiral, the Kreks are moving on the Proxima colonies. Standard formation, they expect us to negotiate once they threaten more civilians. So Young's expression hardened. They still don't understand what they've done. Send word to all fleet commanders. No retreat positions. No fallback plans. We fight until we win or until there's nothing left to fight with. The first major battle came sooner than expected. General Vortak's forces had surrounded the Kepler system, expecting the small human garrison to surrender rather than face overwhelming odds. The Kreks had brought 50 warships against humanity's dozen defenders. Captain Ji-hoon Shin commanded the destroyer New Busan, one of the smallest ships in the human fleet. His vessel was outgunned, outnumbered, and facing enemies with centuries more combat experience. By every military calculation, he should have retreated. Instead, he opened communications to the entire human fleet. This is Captain Shin. The Kreks think we'll run when the odds get bad. Let's show them what happens when humans get angry. The battle that followed broke every rule of space combat that the galaxy had ever known. When human ships took damage, they didn't withdraw to repair. They used their damage systems as weapons. When the New Busan lost its main engines, Captain Shin aimed his drifting ship directly at the Kreks flagship. For New Geneva, he transmitted on all frequencies. For humanity, the explosion took out 3 Kreks cruisers and damaged 2 more. But more importantly, it showed every human in the fleet what they were capable of when they stopped fighting like individuals and started fighting like a single organism. Across the battlefield, other human captains followed Shin's example. The corvette Taegu rammed a Kreks battleship after its weapons failed. The frigate Incheon continued firing even as its hull came apart around the crew. General Vortak watched from his command ship in complete confusion. His forces still outnumbered the humans, but the battle wasn't going according to any tactical manual he had ever studied. Human ships fought like they were part of something larger than themselves, coordinating attacks with precision that seemed impossible for such a young species. General, his tactical officer reported, "We've destroyed 6 human vessels, but they've taken out 12 of ours. Their attack patterns are unprecedented." What the Kreks didn't understand was that the humans weren't just fighting for territory or resources. They were fighting for the right of their species to exist. Every human pilot, every gunner, every engineer knew that surrender meant extinction, not just for them, but for everyone they had ever loved. The tide of battle turned when Admiral So-young Choi arrived with reinforcements. Her fleet consisted of ships from every corner of human space. Earth Navy destroyers flying alongside belt mining vessels converted to warships, Mars colonial fighters escorting corporate security cruisers. "All ships, this is Admiral Choi," she broadcast. "The enemy chose to target our innocents. They chose to demand our surrender or death. Today we show them what happens when humans choose to live." The Kreks retreat began an hour later. General Vortak had never seen anything like it. His superior technology and experienced crews had been overwhelmed by sheer human determination. These weren't soldiers fighting for pay or conquest. They were a species fighting for survival. As the remaining Kreks ships fled the system, Admiral So-young Choi sent a message that would be repeated across the galaxy. To any species monitoring this transmission, "The Kreks demanded our surrender. We give them our answer." The footage of the battle spread through both human and alien space within hours. For the first time in galactic history, the mighty Kreks hegemony had been forced to retreat by a species they had dismissed as primitive. But the humans weren't celebrating their victory. They were already planning their next move. The Kreks had made the mistake of threatening human extinction. Now humanity would show the galaxy what extinction really looked like. The awakening was complete. The war for human survival had become a war for Kreks annihilation. 18 months after the war began, Ambassador Kale stood before the Galactic Council once again. The crystalline chamber that had once echoed with laughter at his warnings now held only silence and fear. Half the seats sat empty. Their delegates had quietly withdrawn from galactic politics rather than risk drawing human attention. "The situation has moved far beyond what anyone predicted," Kale reported, his Violian form flickering with distress patterns. "The Kreks hegemony has lost more than half their fleet. 47 star systems have fallen to human forces. But the humans are not conquering. They are systematically destroying everything that makes the Kreks a military power. Representative Orcs' mechanical voice carried new uncertainty. Surely they will accept surrender now. The Krex leadership has offered territorial concessions, massive war payments, even complete withdrawal from disputed space. The humans rejected every offer without discussion. Kao replied grimly. They do not want territory or wealth. They want the Krex hegemony to cease existing as a threat. The reports coming from the war zone painted a picture that terrified the galaxy's military experts. General Young-Soo Park's expeditionary forces had stopped trying to capture Krex worlds. Instead, they targeted everything that could support enemy operations: shipyards, weapons factories, training facilities, supply depots. When Krex fleets responded to defend these assets, they found human special forces had already destroyed them. Commander Narration had become a nightmare legend among Krex commanders. Her teams appear behind enemy lines like ghosts, striking at infrastructure before vanishing into space. Entire Krex supply chains collapsed as her forces destroyed fuel depots, ammunition stockpiles, and communication arrays. Admiral Taehyun had revolutionized human military doctrine entirely. His fleets didn't occupy territory. They sterilized it of military value. Krex worlds weren't invaded. They were stripped of anything that could build or maintain warships. The populations weren't enslaved. They were relocated to designated zones where they couldn't support the war effort. This goes beyond normal warfare, pleaded Senator Vox of the Centauri Republic, his feathers ruffled with anxiety. They are rewriting the very concept of victory. When the Krex surrender, what will be left? Director Hai-Won Bay of the Terran Strategic Command had been clear in her public statements. The Krex chose to make this a war of extermination by targeting civilians. We will ensure they never have capacity to make that choice again. The final phase began when Admiral So-Young Choi's combined fleets surrounded the Krex home system. The space around Krexos Prime was filled with the debris of the once mighty Imperial Navy. Ships that had terrorized dozens of species now floated as scrap metal, their crews either dead or captured. General Vorthak, the same Krex commander who had ordered the destruction of New Geneva, found himself trapped on the surface of his own capital world. His proud fleet had been reduced to a handful of patrol boats hiding in asteroid fields. His mighty army couldn't even control their own home system anymore. The human blockade was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Instead of simply preventing ships from leaving, the humans actively hunted down every remaining Krex vessel. They didn't negotiate for surrender. They demanded complete disarmament and submission to human authority. This is General Vorthak to any human commander. He transmitted from his bunker deep beneath the Krex capital city. We surrender unconditionally. Name your terms. Just please stop. Admiral So-Young Choi's response was broadcast across the galaxy. Unconditional surrender means exactly that. Complete dismantlement of all military capabilities. All weapons turned over to human forces. All military personnel subject to judgment for war crimes. All government authority transferred to human oversight. The terms were harsh but not genocidal, which surprised many observers. The humans had demonstrated they could annihilate the Krex entirely, but they chose instead to ensure the species could never again threaten anyone. Director Hai-Won Bay explained the human position in a statement that chilled military commanders across the galaxy. We do not want to rule the Krex people. We want to make absolutely certain they can never build another warship, train another soldier, or threaten another innocent civilian. When we are satisfied that this goal is achieved, they can govern themselves again. The transformation was staggering. The Krex hegemony, which had conquered more worlds than any other empire in known space, simply ceased to exist. Their military was dismantled ship by ship, weapon by weapon. Their government was dissolved and replaced by a human-supervised council focused on reconstruction and rehabilitation. But perhaps most frightening to the watching galaxy was how efficiently the humans accomplished this destruction. They had fought a war of annihilation against one of the galaxy's greatest military powers, and they had won decisively in less than 2 years. Ambassador Kale delivered his final assessment to the stunned council. The humans have demonstrated something we have never seen before, the ability to completely destroy an enemy's capacity for future aggression while leaving their civilian population intact. They have perfected the art of permanent victory. General Vorthak's last official act was to sign the surrender documents aboard Admiral So-Young Choi's flagship. As he put his signature to the papers that ended his empire, he looked up at the human admiral. "How?" he asked. "How did a divided species become so unified?" So-Young Choi's answer would be remembered by military historians for centuries. "You taught us that our survival depended on it. We are very good students." The age of the Krex hegemony was over. The age of human unity had begun. The Nexus Prime Station felt different now. Where once hundreds of species had sent their proudest delegates to debate galactic politics, now many seats remained empty. The species that did attend spoke in whispers, their representatives carefully avoiding any topics that might be seen as threatening to the new power in the galaxy. Ambassador Kale stood before the much-reduced Galactic Council, his Violian form steady, but subdued. The warning he had given 3 years ago seemed like ancient history now. The galaxy had learned, but the lesson had cost the Krex everything they had built over centuries. "The war is officially over," Kale announced to the assembled delegates. The Krex hegemony no longer exists as a political or military entity. What follows may surprise many of you. What happened after the Krex surrender had indeed shocked the galaxy. Many species had expected the humans to follow the traditional pattern of conquest, enslavement, occupation, perhaps even genocide. Instead, they had done something unprecedented in galactic history. Peace Commissioner Sujin Ryu had established what humans called rehabilitation zones throughout former Krex space. These were not prison camps or slave colonies, but functioning societies where former Krex citizens could choose their own future. Every Krex individual has been given 3 options, Commissioner Sujin had explained in her broadcast to the galaxy. They can accept exile to neutral territories and never return. They can remain in the zones under human oversight with the possibility of eventual self-governance. Or they can undergo integration programs to join human society as full citizens. The choice was genuine, which confused many galactic observers. The humans had demonstrated they possessed the power to simply eliminate the Krex entirely. Instead, they offered redemption. President Minho Jiang delivered humanity's final statement to the galaxy from the steps of the rebuilt Earth Assembly Building. "We never wanted this war. We warned the galaxy that we were dangerous when united, but you chose not to listen. The Krex chose to target our innocent people. They chose to demand our surrender or extinction." His words were transmitted across every known communication channel, reaching species in the furthest corners of galactic civilization. "But we want to be clear about something," President Minho continued. "We did not destroy the Krex people. We destroyed their ability to threaten others. There is a difference, and that difference defines who we choose to be." The human fleets were already withdrawing to their pre-war boundaries. The massive industrial complexes built for war were retooling for peaceful purposes. The unity that had emerged from humanity's greatest crisis remained, but it was changing from desperation-driven survival into something more deliberate and thoughtful. Admiral So-Young Choi, now retired and serving as Director of Galactic Affairs, met with delegations from nervous species who wanted to understand what humanity intended to do with their newfound power. "You want to know if you should fear us," she said to a group of ambassadors who had requested a private meeting. "That is the wrong question. The right question is whether you plan to threaten innocent people the way the Krex did." The Admiral's words carried weight because everyone knew what humans were capable of when pushed too far. The complete destruction of the Krex military in less than 2 years had demonstrated that humanity possessed not just unity, but the industrial capacity and tactical innovation to back up their determination. "We showed you what humans become when you force us to choose between unity and extinction," Admiral So-Young explained. "But that was defensive unity, born from desperation. Now you get to see what we become when we choose unity freely." The implications were staggering. Humanity's wartime unity had been driven by survival necessity. Now they were maintaining that cooperation by choice, turning their combined efforts toward exploration, science, and peaceful development. Former enemies like Director Sungmin Kong continued working together, converting weapons factories into research centers and civilian shipyards. The corporate wars that had divided humanity before the Krex invasion seemed petty and pointless now. Ambassador Kale delivered his final assessment to the Galactic Council with words that would be remembered for generations. 3 years ago, I warned you not to provoke humanity. The Krex learned too late that humans possess something no other species has demonstrated: the ability to become greater than the sum of their parts when survival is at stake. He paused, letting his words sink in among the few remaining delegates. Some of you are wondering if you should fear them now. I suggest instead that you respect them. The humans have shown they can destroy their enemies completely while sparing innocent lives. They have demonstrated mercy toward those who showed them none. They have proven they can unite for war and remain united for peace. The council chamber fell completely silent as Kale continued. The difference between fear and respect may determine whether your species joins the Krex as a cautionary tale or stands with humanity as they write the next chapter of galactic history. Outside the station's great windows, human ships could be seen in the distance, not as conquerors or occupiers, but as reminders that some warning should never be ignored. The galaxy had learned that humanity's greatest strength was not their weapons or their numbers, but their ability to become something more dangerous than any individual species when threatened. The age of casual aggression toward humanity was over. The age of respectful coexistence had begun. The warning had come too late for Krex, but the galaxy would not make that mistake again.